Hi there. Grab a cuppa, take a seat, come and meet your health coach. Brought to you by vitalhealthcoaches.com. Hello and welcome to today's episode. I am your host Clare Sharpen and I'm delighted to welcome Aneet onto the podcast today. Hi Aneet.
Hi, Claire. Thank you for having me on your podcast.
It's great to have you here. So let's start by you telling us just a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I am a women's health coach and a clinical hypnotherapist. I live in West London. I'm a mum of two boys. One of my boys is on the neurodiversity pathway. I had a career in corporate communications and marketing for a very long time. I always had an interest and passion for alternative therapies. And I now have changed my pathway. And so I'm working as a health coach.
Great. So, can you tell us a bit more about being both a women's health coach and a clinical hypnotherapist?
Yes, so I studied as a health coach with the College of Naturopathic Medicine. And health coaching is really about helping people to create change in their lives.
Hmm.
So I work within the key pillars of nutrition, movement and exercise, sleep, stress management, and joy and aspiration. So I work with those pillars to help create that change within people's lives.
It's a really interesting combination that I've not come across before. So, what difference would you say it's made to your practice combining both health coaching and hypnotherapy?
So I've been a clinical hypnotherapist for over 2 years, and hypnotherapy is really great because it uses the power of positive suggestion to help people move forward. As part of my clinical hypnotherapy, I've done other modalities such as studying the fertile body method. And this is a specialist course that has been developed by a clinical hypnotherapist that specializes in fertility.
Hmm.
So, what that does, it supports people who have challenges in infertility, such as IVF, fibroids, PCOS. So it's a really lovely way to support women that are going through fertility challenges. So I like to use hypnosis as part of mind body approaches, and I like to implement that within the coaching program as an optional choice for anybody that comes to see me. I think it's an option that I give to clients, but what it does is gives a whole holistic approach. So it's a mind-body approach. So if clients feel that they want something more, or they have blocks, or they feel like they have certain hurdles and they just can't get past certain emotions, we can bring in the hypnosis and we can discuss that later on down the line if they feel at a certain point the coaching plan isn't enough for them, and then we can help them to progress down that path forward in their lives.
Hmm.
And you could be at different points in your fertility journey. You know, you could be trying to get pregnant, you could be going through baby loss, you could even be at the end of your journey, you could be trying to find closure, you know, making the decision that you are no longer wanting to try for a baby, or, you know, you could be coming to the end of that journey. So it's a really lovely way of helping support women through those emotions.
So, what is it that led you into this area of work?
So my path really changed direction after I had my first miscarriage. I was trying for another baby. I already had my son, and I had a very traumatic first miscarriage. So I started bleeding and the ambulance was called and I went into surgery within an hour of bleeding. And and I literally woke up after emergency surgery being not pregnant anymore and losing a massive amount of blood. And I was in hospital for days and I was completely traumatized.
Hmm.
And then I had a second miscarriage and I had a scan and it showed that there was no heartbeat. And that really that really was also quite disheartening for me because I was going through morning sickness every day. So it was a bit of a shock when I went to the scan because I had no clue. And I really had to, you know, find it in myself to forgive myself at that point, how I did not know. I blamed myself quite deeply. And then I had surgery for that second miscarriage. And afterwards, I had my third miscarriage, and that one was at home. I found a really great consultant and I went for lots of tests and scans. And then when I got pregnant with my second son, I had a really, really tough pregnancy. I was vomiting 10 times a day. So I was put on lots of meds anyway to support my pregnancy. And then I was having anti-sickness medicine to try and control that because I needed to keep the meds down to carry the pregnancy. I had huge baby loss anxiety. I had a support volunteer from the pregnancy sickness charity, and I also had a counselor from the hospital. So I had a really, really tough pregnancy when I was carrying my second son,
Mm.
and I did make it through with him at the end. And I was blessed to have a second child, but it was a really tough journey, and I
Mm.
really understand the the emotions women go through, the challenges with their partner, the impact it has on you as a person, the emotions, the toll on your body, the guilt that you carry when you go through baby loss, and also, the huge anxiety of
Mm.
baby that you go through when you go through baby loss and then having to get pregnant again, and the worrying time of, am I going to miscarry, you know. So hypnosis can be a huge help, during the time that you're trying for a baby or you're even pregnant, to help you support the emotions that you go through. So that is what started me down that path. I wrote an article, I ran some talking circles, and a lot of women did come and talk to me. So that was how I originally started on this path.
Mm. Thank you for sharing your journey with us and being willing to share that. It's very brave and, like you say, very difficult for women who are going through this. So, if someone is listening to this and they're on their own fertility journey, perhaps hasn't come across any of these approaches before, what steps would you say they can start to take to help them on their journey?
I think it's important to recognize that, with fertility, you might be at different stages. So you might be at the stage where you're planning a pregnancy, and that might be new, exciting, or you might be going through baby loss, or you might be going through IVF, or you might have decided to stop conceiving. So it's really hard to give a broad brush advice because everyone's individuals. But the one thing I would say is that as women, we hold so many hats, being mothers, wives, daughters, carers, business women. And one of the things that I always emphasize is making sure wellness for ourselves is the top priority. And it's something I see really often, that we are not the priority of our own lists, and making sure that we always come first. So start with one positive wellness change, whether it's 15 minutes a day doing meditation, whether it's going to your Pilates class, whether it's making that healthy breakfast swap, but making sure that you put yourself at the top and you take care of yourself, because all too often that is just completely forgotten about.
And for yourself, when you were on your own journey, did you have any help or support or guidance in how to look after yourself, or was it more the kind of medical side and you've mentioned some emotional support. How did that work for you? And I guess what have you learnt over recent years as a result?
I think it was a really lonely journey for me when I went through the process. The medical side was there. I had a great doctor and I was really grateful that I found a really great consultant. The one thing that they both said that always stayed with me is that uh, if you're happy with yourself and you're happy in your relationship, the chances of carrying, a pregnancy all the way to term is more successful. And that is the one thing that always stuck with me because I think what happens is when you get pregnant, you become so stressed out, you get so caught up in the loop that, is it going to work out? You know, what's going to happen this time? Or even when you're trying, you're just living cycle to cycle and you just get caught in that loop. So my advice is, and even with hypnosis, is just the mindfulness, living in the moment, being in the now is something that I think is really important. And if somebody was to go back in time and give me that advice, I think that's the one thing I would have liked to have heard.
Mm.
Like, just live in the moment and live in the now. Don't become so consumed that you forget everything else. Like it sometimes just takes over your world.
So if someone were to come to you for support, how does it work? What sort of thing can they expect?
I have a person-centered approach and I work to an individualized plan. So in the first consultation, I cover a full health history and we have a look at the possible symptoms that arise from hormonal imbalances. So those can be things like symptoms such as irregular menstrual cycles, mood changes, tiredness, fatigue, skin changes, infertility, and bloating. And as I mentioned before, I work within the pillars of nutrition, movement and exercise, sleep, stress management, joy, and aspirations. So the client and I make a plan together, and it is the client who decides the areas that they want to work on. And it's not an overnight process.
Mm.
So we do a few actions together and we take our time because if I give you a whole list of actions, it's just going to sit in your drawer and it won't get done.
Mm.
So we try and incorporate that as best as we can into your routine. And the hypnotherapy is a complete optional choice. And sometimes it's not till you start your own plan and you process and you realize this is what I need or this is what I don't need. And you might want to change things as you go along. So we co-create the plan together. And that's how I like to work with my clients.
Mm. And can you give me some examples of practical things that someone might decide they want to do?
So they might decide that they need more movement into their daily routine and not be at the desk. So they might decide that they want to take a lunchtime walk and go and sit in the park and instead have their lunch there and do a walk every day. So they might decide they want to cycle to walk in the summer times, or they might find that actually the morning rush is too busy, they don't have time for breakfast. They have children already, so we could make a plan to make the breakfasts beforehand. Uh, Overnight soaked oats with chia seeds and fruit, put in pots and put that in the fridge. So they can give that to the kids straight away, or they could even take it to work. So we can incorporate things that works best around their lifestyle. So that's the way I like to look at things. If plans and actions aren't manageable, they're never going to happen.
Mm.
So the client needs to drive the actions. It needs to come from them. So they have to kind of decide what works for them.
Yeah, they sound like really practical, down to earth, sensible kind of things.
I hope so.
So, um, fertility and miscarriage and the stuff we've talked about are obviously massively emotional, difficult issues. You've talked a bit about taking a mind-body approach. So, can you explain a bit more about how this is different, perhaps, to what someone might experience from a mainstream medical approach?
Yes, so the mind-body approach recognizes that our emotional, mental, and physical are a whole person. So it's a holistic approach. You could have the best health coaching plan in place, and sometimes clients just struggle because on some level there's a block somewhere, and the client might need help with that mindset shift. And this is where my training as a life coach and clinical hypnotherapist comes in. So, the kind of emotions I can work with as a hypnotherapist can be about guilt,
Mm.
about letting go, and also about being present in the moment. So, a lot of really nice scripts that I have about hypnotherapy is about mindfulness. So, being in the moment. And I can do some lovely work about setting up a CBT anchor that clients can then just use later, which is like an anchor that they can use and it can just bring them into the moment and they can use that at any time. So, really, if you're just having the best plan in place and you've got the best coaching plan and you've got great actions and you've got all of that down to a T, but if you're feeling really emotional every day, and if you're feeling really guilty, or if you're feeling like you can't be in the moment and and you're just feeling upset all the time,
Mm.
that holds you back as a person. And sometimes you can't move forward.
Mm.
And it's not really about the coaching plan. Then that's just about you letting go and moving forward. And it's a big issue, that comes up a lot in fertility, the guilt and, the letting go. And I understand that because I've been there and I've walked that path. And infertility is nobody's fault. And unfortunately, sometimes we become our worst enemies and we have these feelings, but it is never anyone's fault. And sometimes clients just need a really safe space where they can just come and I can hold that space open for them.
Mm. Mm. It's so incredible, your empathy and compassion because of, like you say, you've walked this journey. It's really precious, I think. So I know you have a passion for particularly supporting women from the Asian community around miscarriage. So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, so coming from an Asian background, there is taboo and silence in our culture around miscarriage. You know, Miscarriage is often referred to as a silent loss, and I know that the Asian community doesn't openly discuss and share the conversation about miscarriage. And I also think that it's just not fully understood.
Mm.
So there is a lot of stigma attached to women in particular when it comes to baby loss, and unfortunately, it is the women who are left to feel the shame and the guilt alongside with all the grief that
Mm.
they are already feeling. And and it's really unfortunate, but over the years, I've heard so many stories from women from the Asian community that have had, comments made to them from their their in-laws, from the families, and made to feel guilty and ashamed. But we all know science says the embryo is 50% the female and 50% the male, and again, it's nobody's fault, and nobody should feel like that. For a mother and father who don't see a baby make it into the world, it's no different than losing a loved one, and they need love and support. So, it's good to talk about these things and get the understanding in the Asian community to support couples that are going through infertility, that they need love, support, and understanding. So that is the way we should be moving forward.
Mm.
But my sessions are always completely confidential, and I hold space for clients to be able to share comfortably so they can move forward in health goals. So anyone that does come to me about fertility or anything else, I always make it very clear that is a confidential setting, and that, I'm not going to be in the community talking about them, because it is a genuine concern that people from the community have. So any person, when and as Claire, as health coaches, as clinical hypnotherapists, as therapists, we have to work in strict confidentiality with our clients.
Mm. Yeah. So, do you work both online and in person?
So at the moment, I'm working online only, and that is the main way to contact me.
Yeah. Okay. So, where can someone find out more about you?
So I am listed on the Vital Health Coaches platform. So if you go into Vital Health Coaches, you can see my profile, you can see my packages, and there's a way to contact me. So it's a really great website. It's got all the details of me on there. You just go to www.vitalhealthcoaches.com.
Great. Oh, well, I'm really grateful to you, Aneet, for coming and being so vulnerable with us on the episode today, sharing your own experience with us, sharing your empathy and compassion, and how that is translating into really practical support for women going through all sorts of challenges relating to hormone health and fertility. So, yeah, I just want to say thank you for sharing that with us and for coming on the episode today.
Thanks, Claire, and thank you so much for having me on your podcast.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode. For more on how a health coach can support you in your health journey, please go to vitalhealthcoaches.com.